If you do a lot with meetings or office work, here's a set of 26 phrasal verbs that should help you out.
What's up, guys, and welcome to Why Girlfriends English. We are going to talk about some phrasal verbs that will hopefully help get you through that meeting there at work that you have this week or next week or whatever it is to get you fluent so that you can understand others and be better understood.
Phrasal verbs are really tricky, so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about each of the ones we're presenting to you today. So let's jump in.
So the first thing is you actually have to start the meeting, right? A lot of the workplace vocabulary happens even before we get there. So for example, a person may say that, hey, carve out time in your schedule for this meeting.
This is very much a picture of like you take a tool and you're like cutting into wood or you're cutting something out. And that's the idea is you have schedules with lots of blocks that are claimed by other things. You have to carve out a space between those in order to make this meeting.
Yeah, meetings don't just happen. We absolutely have to allocate out time from something else in order to be able to do this meeting.
Another one is if something comes up last minute that's a higher priority than the meeting to be held, then you can put off the meeting. And it means basically to postpone.
But be careful, because if you put off something, whether it's work or a meeting too many times, then the other person is definitely going to think that you're just not really wanting to do it at all. And that's going to give them a really bad idea in their mind to say, oh, he just really doesn't want to do it.
Next, we're going to talk about the meeting tasks. Usually there's a list, there's an agenda for that meeting. You run over or you go over the details of something.
Another way to say it is you can pin down or nail down the details. So the purpose of a meeting is to plan out or lay out the plan for the coming days, and that requires admittedly a lot of details.
With these details, we have actually a lot of phrasal verbs to go into these. So you can run over the details really quick. You can go over the details briefly, for examples. You can pin down the details or pin down a time for specific tasks that need to be done to complete the project. You can also nail down times to take care of some tasks.
You might also have some brainstorming, maybe not so detail oriented, but kind of taking a 30,000 foot kind of view to it. And so you say, hey, let's get together, let's bounce off some ideas.
I want to bounce some ideas off of you. It's kind of like I want to have this conversation where there's a lot of back and forth. Like, what do you think of this idea? I think that's terrible. What about this instead? You will find that business has a lot to do with sports idioms and sports phrasal verbs. This is one of those. It's just to bounce ideas off of somebody.
Another one that's kind of like bounce off is to come up with ideas. So if you meet together with your teammates and you say, hey, next quarter, we need to do something different. Let's come up with another strategy, a new strategy that we can try to implement this quarter.
Once you come up with that plan, you can lay it out for everybody to see. Kind of like a roadmap.
The phrase iron out can actually be details like we just talked about before, or it can also be for a plan. So if we have a broad roadmap, we can then continue and follow that roadmap to say, where are we going to be in this time frame? Where are we going to be in that time frame? But we can also use it for those details. So who's doing what tasks? How are we going to get there? What's John going to do for the next week? This is the idea of iron out. And it comes from actually clothes, not sports in this case, but in clothes where you have an iron and you have to iron out the wrinkles.
Yeah, you have like wrinkles in a plan. You got to iron them out.
One of the things that you might do for those details is you might have to go over a document. So if you are having to type out a document or a response or an email or something official that you really need to have right, one of the things you can do is you can have a meeting to go over the document to make sure everyone's okay with what the document is saying.
Right, so you can go over the details, you can go over the document. Another thing that is really common to say is to rattle off. And to rattle off has a lot to do with you've got some numbers to share, you've got some statistics to share, you've got some ideas to rattle off to the meeting that is beneficial for ironing out whatever is being done in that meeting, whatever the agenda is. And so to rattle off is really common, and it's a great one to have in your toolbox for work.
A big part of meetings is that you have to participate. Well, maybe you don't have to, but you should participate in the meetings. In order to participate in the meeting, you need to chip in to the meeting, which actually comes from poker or from gambling, where you actually put your chips into the playing thing. So you're not on the outside, you're actually on the inside, and you actually have some skin in the game, and you participate. in the meeting.
You can also chime in. I've always used it as chime in as in joining a meeting, especially online, because it plays a chime when you come in. And it's kind of like a doorbell. The door chimes when you walk in. And so I've always used it in terms of in an entry. But Josh has said that he uses it and has heard it many times for meaning contributing to a conversation in a business meeting. So there are a couple of uses from people that live in the same area but have heard it used different ways.
Another one is to point out. So if a person is responding and the speaker or the leader of the meeting is, hey, thanks for pointing that out, we have to get back to you on that, meaning that we have to then follow up, which is another phrasal verb, so that we can then figure out and iron out these details.
Grammatically, you can say point it out or to point out something. So usually we would split the phrase. We really like to say, I want to point something out to you. We do this quite often, but you also would say, I want to point it out, or I want to point out that. So this one is tricky. Make sure you're paying attention and try to sound as natural as you can with those around you in a meeting.
Along the same lines is to bring something up, or thanks for bringing that up, or he brought that up in the meeting. This is participation. It's a lot of recognition that this is where it came from. Like John brought up the good point that we shouldn't do this quarter because of this reason. We're trying to kind of attribute that thought to a person.
And it's something that they had before the meeting. Like, that's why it's a phrasal verb, is because it comes from before, or it comes from something outside the meeting and it's brought up into the meeting.
Sometimes participation gets a little wiry, gets a little distracted, and so we have to sometimes say, hey, let's key in on this issue. This is why we got to the meeting. This is what we need to do, so let's key in on this issue. Let's save that one for another time.
Yeah, that's an example of where we took the noun, a key point, and we put it into a verb form. So to key in on, let's focus on the key point here. Now, if there's something that's going to take some time to just think about and to decide whether that's the best plan of action or not, you're going to mull it over. So M-U-L-L, it's kind of weird, but to mull something over is to really think about it very intentionally. You're going to ponder it. It's multifaceted. It's just deep thought on something, and it's going to have some implications for other things that happen. And if you have to mull something over, then that person's going to have to get back to you.
Yeah. It's kind of like homework, but it's for meeting an idea is more than just like actual writing it out. Getting back to you may just simply be an email. Sometimes meetings aren't always very good. Sometimes they are very boring. And so we would call those meetings when they take a long time, that you've carved out this precious time out of your schedule. Sometimes they drag on or drone on, meaning they feel like they go on forever.
So we would say that this drags on. Like, this meeting has drug on for over an hour. It's time to get out back to work. Why are we here? This is not a nice thing to say. I will say, this is not something you lean over to your coworker and say, he's just droning right now. Do not do that. But it is very much a picture to us as English speakers. When you say somebody's droning on, it's very much like this monotone speaker idea. Nobody cares. Everybody's kind of sleepy or on their phones or something like this. That's what that means. It's not a compliment.
Another way that meetings can be bad, though, is sometimes they don't accomplish the task that they just said that they were going to do, which is droning on is part of that. But another part of that is muddling the thing up. Muddling up the details. So we go into a meeting and we're like, all right, we're going to hammer out some details. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to business. And then it actually becomes more unclear. It becomes muddled or muddled up.
Another one, if you really need to make something simpler for people to understand, more digestible, you're going to dumb it down. So dumbing it down is like taking those really big fancy terms, those really complex ideas, and you make it much more simple for a layperson to be able to understand.
It does still have a bad feeling to it because it's like, oh, that I'm calling you dumb.
I've dumbed this down for you. Not very good. The next few that we're going to talk about is ending the meeting. Now, sometimes somebody doesn't even go, so they just kind of blow it off. They blow off the meeting. Yeah, that's not a very nice thing to do, but it is what it is. It happens.
Yeah, or sometimes they just don't care when they're in the meeting, right? And so they may be there, but they're not actually there.
Or they blow off the content of the meeting, right?
Ooh.
Like, they're there, they pay attention, they contribute, their idea wasn't taken, so they go and do what they wanted to do anyway. Not very productive.
Since we're carving out this time, right, a lot of times when we're ending the meeting, we're getting back to work that was already predetermined. So like, for example, you get back to it. You get back to your own work. Or you just say time's up and let's go back. Sometimes you may jokingly say time flies, right? We have this expression of time flies when we're having fun. A person say, wow, time has flown by, and everybody's sleeping in the corner because the meeting was so boring. But that's sometimes the joke we can make because, yes, we all know that meetings take a while.
But you can use it truly, genuinely, to mean like the sentiment of this was so fun that time has flown by. We normally wouldn't say that to a meeting. Usually if we apply it to a meeting, we're joking. We're using exaggeration on purpose. But sometimes we mean this when we refer to children, like the time with them has flown by. Like in ways it is really slow, but in other ways they were a baby like almost yesterday. Like you can remember that. So you can use this phrase in particular, you can use in a positive sense or in a negative sense.
And the last one that we're going to talk about today is carry on. So a person, the leader of the meeting or whatever, he may say, let's carry on with our work. And the idea is that you have been working, here's this meeting time, and then you continue to work. So the meeting is just kind of like in the middle. So it's a work, meeting, let's carry on with that work that you were already doing the previous day.
Yeah, or they might tell you in the meeting, like carry on with what you're doing. It's helpful to achieving the overall project. We can also use this in an encouraging way, like, thank you so much, just carry on. Like if you're asking your boss, like, what are ways that I can improve? And they just say, you know, you're doing great as it is, carry on. Like that's a good thing. It's an uplifting thing. So this one can be used in multiple ways. So be careful with paying attention to paralanguage, context of the conversation, context of the situation, and intonation when you hear this one.
All right, guys. So meetings are actually important for real life, but they are also laced. They are filled with a lot of special vocabulary. So next time you're in a business meeting, keep your ears open for these phrasal verbs so that you can be understood and better understand others.
Yep. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much. We'll catch you on the next one.